Wait, are you are you gonna count me in? Whatever. I'm just gonna go for it. Welcome to the Queen's Lead podcast. I'm your host, Amy Singleton, and as a child of the 80s, I'd love to say queens rule, but they don't. Queens lead. Being a queen means you are worthy to be a leader of people. The guests on our show do exactly that. They are leading the way in their businesses, families, and communities. And they're taking their rightful place in the spotlight, leading and inspiring the developing queens in all of us. Welcome to the Queen's Lead podcast.
Now here's your host, Amy Singleton, the queen of realness, leading conversations about business, life, and the real shit you want to know.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Queen's Lead podcast. Today, we have some juicy treat for you, straight from the UK, Carla Crivaro. She is a sex, love, and relationship coach, and the very top of her website says, delicious sex. So welcome, Carla. I am so excited to talk to you about having delicious sex.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Amy. Yeah, the reason when I was coming up trying to think of something, like the type of tagline that I was going to use, I was like, what adjective do you use before sex? And it took a while and a lot of thinking. And I thought, delicious sounds good because, it's about finding your own flavor that works for you. And so that's the reason that I came up with the word delicious sex.
Oh, I love that. I love that delicious sex. So tell us what brought you to this unique space. I'm sure there's a beautiful, delicious story there.
Yeah. So I'll do the very short version. So I had chronic anxiety as a mother, really struggling to look after myself, like my own emotional well-being, and ended up falling into sort of like my own self-development journey. And along the way, as I was starting to be aware of my own past and how my past affected my present, there was the opportunity to really, rather than just sort of moving into survival and feeling like I'm able to cope with things, like how can I give myself more? Like how can I really thrive in life? And one of the areas that I looked at was my sex life with my husband. It was like I didn't really have any issues in the sense of like I could get orgasms and there was pleasure there, but it was like just felt like there could be something more, like there was something missing, like a sense of aliveness, a sense of connection. And so I decided to train to be a sex, love, and relationship coach. The sex part was for myself, and then the coaching, I thought, and I'll just coach anxious mothers who are, who are experiencing what I used to experience and support them in that way. And then it was doing that training that completely opened my eyes to how important our relationship to our sexuality is. So it's like the foundation of who we are as human beings and how we relate to ourselves, but also other people. And what I came to learn about myself is that I had been very, very shut down in my 20s. So as I started my training, I suggested to my husband that we go non-monogamous to have the opportunity to really explore, what is out there sexually. So I spent 18 months exploring non-monogamy, going to play parties, really getting to understand myself at a sexual level and relating to other sexual beings as well, not just my husband. Since then, my journey is that my husband and I are no longer married, but what we have decided to do is live together as parents for our children. And we have our own relationships outside of that partnership. So my husband, well, he's not my husband anymore, my ex-husband, my co-parenting partner, let's say, and I have our own monogamous relationships and then support each other as parents living together, because our children are quite young. They're only 9 and 6. So having that stability we feel is really important. And for the most part, we get on really well. Obviously, I say for the most part because we're human beings and, there's always going to be an element of disagreement and tension when we're stressed. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, that's so interesting because that is actually something that my ex-husband and I considered back in, 2010, 2010 when we divorced, we considered all the things, open relationship. We considered living together, but staying married, but having open relationship, living together, but divorcing for the kids, because our kids were very young. Luckily now they're much older, and we decided to part ways fully. But that's very interesting that you've been able to make that work in your relationship and to stay in the same household. That's not the choice that most people are able to make.
And I think part of that reason was because there wasn't really any problem as such with our relationship. What we both came to realize was, as we did our own self-development, that what was generally keeping us together was our attachment wounds, so our own attachment trauma. And so once we began to heal that, it's like, actually, what is keeping us together? Like that,
Yeah.
yes, we get on, we're able to communicate reasonably well. We understand each other at a really deep level. We've lived together for about 15, 16 years. So, there's a lot of, he probably knows me better than anybody, definitely more than my own parents. So yeah, in a way it just sort of like made sense. We've tended to think a little bit outside of the box with a lot of the decisions that we've made with regards to parenting, with regards to, obviously exploring non-monogamy. And so, at this moment in time, I mean, you don't know what the future holds, but at this moment in time, with the age of the children and with our current situation, that's something that we feel is, that's working for us and for the kids as well.
Oh, okay. Can we pause to honor the fact that she said, that's what's working for us? Okay. If you're watching this, I'm putting the Queen Leadership crown on already in this, in the video version of this podcast, because Carla just said it. It's what works for us. And I think especially, I don't know how it is in the UK where you are. She's just northwest of England, and I am in Oklahoma City in the Bible Belt of the United States. And doing things differently is really hard. Was it difficult to make that decision? And what kind of a response do you get from people there in your culture? Or is it just like totally fine with everybody?
Well, I think the people that know us, that knew that we were non-monogamous, and then moved into sort of like a co-parenting partnership, I think for them, the initial shock was the non-monogamy that they had to deal with, especially for our parents.
I'll bet.
So that was the biggest thing for people to deal with initially. So then moving into a co-parenting partnership, I think a lot of people do see the maturity in that, the fact that we're able to get on with each other. Just because I think so many people, when they break up, they have so many unmet needs that they've not been able to address with each other. They've not known how to communicate them with each other, that what ends up happening is there is so much resentment that they begin to really dislike the other person because that person is not seeing who I am, and they feel so unseen in relationship that resentment carries through and creates this almost hate. A lot of people talk about their exes with a lot of hate. And I think that's, such a shame that people end up being in that situation. Yeah. With regards to people who don't know us, when I explain that, I think they're curious more than anything. And also, they can see, it does make sense. Because also, especially if you look at the moment, at least in the UK, they're calling it a cost of living crisis. Single parent families are really struggling. So if you can keep those finances together, because just thinking about like having two separate houses, our boys having a bed each in a separate house, the separate bills, it's buying a new vacuum cleaning. Yeah. But like the small.
It adds up big time.
Yeah,
for sure. Especially in today's economy, which is a global problem, not just there or here, for sure. Yeah. So that's solving a problem, and it's what's working for you. And that's what's so beautiful about it, is like, we don't know your story. We don't know anybody's story. And so the snap judgments that people might make, maybe they could reconsider that when they consider, the whole story.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people think, well, just because you get on, can you not like try and make it work?
Yeah.
So, and I think my parents tend to be more on that side. They're the sort of people who are like, you stay married forever and make it work, even if you speak to each other really disrespectfully. It's like, well, we stay together, like,
my God, we made that commitment and we're going to
yeah.
see it all the way through. I mean, I would just say on the last episode we recorded of this podcast, like, being able to turn and make another decision and go a different way is something that I think is getting more accepted in our culture and in our lives than it used to be. But I'm so glad you were able to make that choice. Be like, actually, no, this is not working anymore. And we're better people individually because of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it just means as well that I think because of the journey that I've had as being quite unusual, a lot of people feel that they can come to me with their own stories and their own issues and feel less judgment,
Yeah.
and, if people want or desire something that's a little bit out of the ordinary, they know that I'm not going to judge them for it. It just helps people to sort of relax in that space. Yeah, because I can't remember, was it before we started recording or after that when you explained about your own personal journey? It's like that. The moment that I share something about myself, somebody else feels like, oh, I can share with this person because, they're open-minded and I feel safe with them. So
Yeah. You've breaking down all those barriers for them to feel, you know, less with the spotlight just on them, like, oh, okay, this is community. That's why I feel such a huge responsibility to stand up and talk about my history of depression, my history of alcoholism, my of addiction, of being suicidal, all of these things. When we raise our hands and say me too, and this is what that looks like, and here's what it gives others that permission that they need so badly to share and learn and grow in their own situation when they can see themselves in you. So thank you
yeah,
for sharing that with our audience. Um I want people to have a better sex life. I really do. It's so important. I don't think that we give enough credit to sex in the ways that it should be credited. So
yeah,
talk to us a little bit about that and about your therapy with that. What do you find to
yeah.
be some of the biggest problems people are experiencing?
So, before I talk about the biggest problems, I'd just like to say, because this is something that we said as well before recording. So, like, I'm on Instagram, but my content is frequently removed or goes against community standards. And I think this is the issue that we have as society at large. The fact that sex is seen as so taboo, the fact that sex is seen as something that we don't talk about, hidden under the carpet. What that means is that a lot of people, particularly, clients that come to me, they don't have anywhere to go. They might go to their doctor, their local doctor, GP in the UK. I think you call them physicians in the US. And they're normally unequipped to be able to support people.
Yeah.
Quite often they have their own shame around their own sexuality, even like relationship counselors and relationship therapists, when people talk and step into the realm of talking about sexuality, unless you've done your own inner work around your own sexuality, holding space for things that come up for other people can be really confronting. Having people's issues, mirrored back to you. So I would say that, like, underlying all of the sexual issues that people experience is the shame element, because women want to be sexy and want to be sexual, but we have been told that by society at large and by religion that we are not that, which is just not true. There's so much research out there that shows that when you take into account the fact that women's desire is slightly different to men's. So do you know what I mean when I say spontaneous desire and responsive desire?
Go ahead and define it just in case.
Okay.
Just in case the listeners
So,
don't.
so spontaneous desire is like, you be walking down the road, you see somebody attractive, and you can feel like the turn on and the sexual energy. And responsive desire is, somebody makes a move on you and starts to caress your face, puts their hand between your thighs. And then once somebody has started to make a move on you, you're responding to that. So that's responsive desire.
Okay.
So once you account for cultural differences, gender differences, and how women reply to certain questionnaires, and all of these different things. Men have, generally speaking, a higher spontaneous desire. Women tend to have more responsive desire. But when you actually, take it into account and look at it side by side, women actually have more desire than men for sex.
Wow.
And if you look at the statistics for like non-monogamy, for example, 2/3 of relationships are opened up by women. So, the need and the desire for women specifically to want to go and explore their sexuality is really, really high. And so because women don't have access to this information, because we're constantly told that we're the ones in the relationship that want less sex, if as a woman you desire to have more sex and your libido is low and you think that, I would like to have more, there's a lot of shame that prevents you from going to get that support. And again, the thing is with men is because men have been conditioned to, be the virile person, the person that's extremely sexual, men
the pursuer,
the one that's
the
supposed to want,
yes.
The one that's supposed to want the notches on the bedpost. A lot of men actually don't identify with that. And I would say all men don't. And if they have latched onto that, that is just because they want to belong to the pack, the men in the group, and they want to be respected. What a lot of men really, really desire is an intimate connection with a woman. So I've had, the men that have come to me who have not had sex for a long time in their relationships. And even though, yes, they would like to have sex, their initial first goal and desire is just to be able to sit on the sofa and have a cuddle with their partner, because the intimacy has, become so disconnected that, they just really crave that physical touch. And it doesn't need to necessarily be sex, but it can just be, cuddling on the sofa while watching a movie and, stroking your partner's hair. Even something as like intimate as that. And so, and a lot of men don't like to admit that. They have shame around the fact that maybe they don't want sex as much as they, in inverted commas, should. So it's I suppose what a lot of the work that I do is just sort of like bringing people back to the authentic desires, what it is that they want, and how can they, go for that without having too much of effect on the conditioning that's coming from them. So stepping into what's my authentic sexual expression and being true to that.
Yeah. And I think the training starts so young. For me it did. Like, I mean, that conditioned response to when I was a teenager, it was true love waits. We put rings on it. Like, we were not going to have sex. We're not going to think about sex. We were not going to talk about that dirty thing. I didn't know what it even really was, I don't think, until maybe I was married. I don't even know. But yeah, I mean, there's so much wrapped up in our heads from what we were taught as children to where we are now. So how do we go from there to there?
How do we go from there to there as a society or like as an individual?
As an individual, I think that society has a long way to go. And I think that societal change starts with an individual change, right? So if we can get our heads wrapped around how we can be better at this, then maybe society will eventually change.
Yeah, so for me, it's exploring like our individual relationship to our bodies, being able to have a positive relationship to our genitals as well. So, both men and women have unhealthy relationship to their genitals. So men that I work with tend to have like, because I don't want to generalize with every man. So it's easy if I just talk about the men that I work with, but a lot of the men that I work with tend to have a relationship with their genitals that seems to be like almost a taking relationship. So what can their penis give them? It can give them an ejaculation. It can give them an orgasm. It can give them that connection to another woman. So there's an element of taking from that part of their body. And then for a lot of women who have never even looked at themselves in the mirror, there's a lot of embarrassment, and because we don't really see other women's vulvas. Like, so, when men go into the showers, they might get a glimpse of another man's penis and testicles, and they tend to have more of an idea of what they look like. But
Right.
as women, you don't. Like, what, you know, a question that I get reasonably frequently for women that have explored themselves internally is like, how do I know it feels normal? You know,
Yeah.
and also, you know, when I invite women to do mirror work, so looking at their own vulva, just being aware of the emotions that come up for them as they are looking at themselves. And I also share a library which has got so many different shapes and colors of vulvas, just so that people can see, you know, so that women can see the variety that is out there and just be able to understand that there is normal, that there's nothing unusual.
Yes.
And then, you know, once you've built that relationship to that part of your body where there's so much shame and so much disconnection, that then really helps you to get more in tune with, you know, your sexuality. So, you know, what is it that I want from sex? What is it that I want to experience? So, you know, what type of pleasure would I like to experience? What type of connection? You know, because sex can take us off in lots of different directions. If we are curious and playful, you know, our attitudes to sex can be that we tend to then remove the focus and goal of things like orgasm and ejaculation, and then we're able to maneuver towards playfulness and curiosity, and that is where we tend to build more connection with the person that we're with, when we're able to remove any specific goals about what sex should look like, and how we can be really playful and fun, and, you know, how can I really learn about this other person and their body, and remove any idea of the direction it should go in. Because for a lot of heterosexual couples, you know, there tends to be this sort of like, we have a bit of a kiss and a cuddle. Any like digital sex or oral sex tends to be considered as foreplay, and then the main event is considered to be intercourse. You know, at some point the woman might be fortunate enough to have an orgasm, because there is the orgasm gap of, like, depending on the study, between 30 to 60% of women who have orgasms, compared to men, which is between 80 and 90%.
Wow.
So it depends on the study. And then, you know, the sex finishes with the man's ejaculation. So that tends to be the, you know, the linear trajectory for most people's sex life. And it's like, how can we shake it up and do things differently? And how can we experience pleasure and be sexual and not even touch each other's genitals, you know? So getting really curious about what sex can look like, and really allowing ourselves to explore each other's bodies with different intentions.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. It's not about the end goal, not necessarily, right? Or the end goal that we think should be the end goal, right? Talk to me a little bit about sex education. I mean, like, where obviously as adults, we're able now to access people like you who can give us an education, but what do you feel like may need to change in education, and where does that education need to come from? Should it come from the school? Should it come from the parent? You know, whose responsibility is that in your mind? And how can we educate our kids and our youth and people in general without them just resorting to porn, which is not sex?
So, and this is exactly what I was going to sort of like bring to attention. So, 1 in 9 children by the age of like 10 or something like that, more or less, that's a statistic, have seen porn. So, you know, that's really young. And if you think about children now that have their own mobile phones, the chances are they have seen porn, or if they've got their own devices, right. Yeah. Because, you know, they get shared in groups, in messaging groups, they get shared in lots of different ways. And so what you've got to think is, if the education comes from porn, that's where my child is learning about it. Now, removing devices or constantly monitoring another human being, because I think sometimes we forget that children are human beings.
Right.
What that can do is that can give them a sense of the fact that they themselves are not to be trusted. You know, it means that we are creating a disconnection from our own children. If instead what we can do is we can be really honest and open and vulnerable and have an uncomfortable conversation with our own children around sex and pleasure, relationships, communication, if we can show them a healthy way to explore and experience all of these and making them aware of, not right now, so if we're having this conversation with like a 10 or 11-year-old, we're being very mindful of saying, not right now, this is for, when you're older, but without scaring them about infections and pregnancy, giving them that sense of responsibility because you care for another human being and their health and their welfare. How can I care for somebody else and how can I care for myself? And having that respect for your own body and having that respect for other people's body comes from having these open communications and being able to talk openly and honestly. Because if, as a child, you can have these conversations with your parent, which anyway will be uncomfortable, it means that you're able to have those uncomfortable conversations with a partner and talk about things like condoms, because, that discomfort, you've already learned to work through it by having the conversation with your parents. So anyway, going back to the issue of porn, if you're able to sit down with your child and have these open conversations and talk to them about porn as well, what that means is that, when they do, because it's not a case of if, it's when they do get exposed to it, they are already literate in understanding that porn is not real. It's, marketed, encouraging them to be really aware. Like a lot of us are encouraged to, when we watch the news or a particular news program, it's like, who's making the news? Who's invested in it? How do they benefit from it? It's media literacy. So it's also having porn literacy. And if there are people listening that are parents, a really great resource is Sex Positive Families, which can be found on Instagram. And then they have a whole load of resources of like YouTube videos to watch as parents or to watch with your children or just for children, and a whole range of books on how to have these conversations with children at, age appropriate conversations. So
what's the name of that resource again?
Sex Positive Families.
Sex Positive Families. I love that. See, it wasn't until I watched a special on TV several years ago. Lucy Liu was the host, and I think it was like called Real Life or This Is Life. I think it's called This Is Life, and they did an entire special on porn. And it was that catalyst that, and actually a friend of my husband's was having a porn addiction. He had a masturbation addiction and could not climax with a human partner. And I've also been with men that had experienced that. And it's a real problem. And so it was then that we started having conversations with our boys who are now 15 and 19, and my husband's grown daughters that were still in the home. The one grown daughter that was still in the home at the time, telling them, look, you're going to see this. This is not real. This is what that is. And this is what a real sexual relationship looks like, talking about, consent and protection and the heart connection of it all. And really what that means and all of those conversations, and telling them the risk that they're at to develop that addiction and actually inhibit their own sexual pleasure, by desensitizing themselves to that next biggest thing that it takes to get them off, essentially. I mean, it's a serious conversation that can impact our kids in their teens and 20s and 30s and on into their life. So I feel like we can't not have those difficult conversations. We can't not say things to our kids like, people do drugs because they feel amazing, and people go to porn, for this reason. And this is what might happen if you do too. So just to be aware of that. Do you think it's important to share that?
Yeah. And just, talking about porn, like if you think about it, humans have in some shape or form always self-pleasured to porn. Because, okay, the thing is now, you've got like the videos, the short videos that are easily accessible on the mobile phone. I'm 43 and I know that, so I know that, the men who are my age, when they were like late teens, they had magazines that they would self-pleasure and look at. And then, you know, when they could get to the top shelf and get the videos in the video store, they would watch those in self-pleasure. And, you know, people think that it's like only a recent thing that porn has been around, but porn in some shape or form has been there a long time. What's different and what's changed is how we relate to that. So because the way that a lot of men are masturbating to porn is different to the way that they masturbated to it when they were like 20 years ago. Because what a lot of men are doing is they're like sat at a computer screen, or they're sat up in bed holding their phone, and they're going for the most interesting parts of the scenes of the actual videos or films, or sometimes they're not even watching full videos, you know, because I've taken a look at Pornhub myself just to understand, you know, what men are watching.
Yeah.
And it's literally, you know, you can scroll through, click on something and watch the most interesting part in just a few minutes. The issue is with that is, you know, and men who I'm supporting coming off porn, it's about, okay, rather than just going for the main bit, the dopamine hit, taking yourself on a journey. So watching a full video. So you know, because that takes your body on the similar journey that you would experience if you were as a human being. So it's teaching your body to relate to sex and sexuality and sexual energy as though another human being was there. So what do I mean by that? If you're watching a video where, you know, there's people interacting and flirting, you can feel the chemistry and the sexual energy building, and then they might start kissing, and then things, you know, the sexual energy ramps up. As you're following that journey with the video that then reaches climax, and then there's like this down part to it, you know, where the couple, or, you know, if there's more than one person, you know, they're sort of, you know, in that moment of bliss and relaxing, your body is able to follow that trajectory as well. And and you're taken on that journey. The big problem is that a lot of people are just going for that immediate dopamine hit. And also the position as well. So, you know, they're not even aware of like their own bodies. So, you know, another thing that I suggest with men wanting to come off porn is, you know, as they pleasure themselves, to touch their own bodies, take a moment away from the actual porn, and then just feel into themselves, into their own bodies, feeling the sensations and the pleasure that they experience in their own body, because that will then train them that when they come back to their partner, or, you know, a partner, that they're then able to be present with the sensations rather than requiring the visuals to get them turned on. They're able to connect more to the sensations. And then also, you know, that death grip that a lot of men have when they're watching porn, because they are so focused on the visuals and disconnected to their own touch. It's like, how can I soften my grip and how can I slow everything down? So interspersing, you know, the porn watching with a different way of holding and touching themselves, so that they're teaching their bodies a new way of pleasure that is more in line with what they would experience when they are with a partner.
Yeah. Well, good luck getting them to do that on their own. I think they're going to need a coach for that. But it's so heartbreaking to me that men, and I'm sure women, become addicted to this thing with that immediate dopamine hit, because then it requires something larger. And it's like drugs, right? Then it requires a larger dose, or something more wild, or something more seemingly unattainable for them. And then when they come back to a human partner, it's not even possible for them to get even close to having an intimate experience at that point, right?
Yeah, because they've become so disconnected to their own bodies and to being completely present. They're relying totally on their visuals and requiring visual stimulation. And, you know, one of the things that I tend to work with men and women, even if, you know, porn isn't necessarily a thing, is returning to the sensations in the body, you know, rather than trying to bring up a fantasy into your mind to get you to orgasm. How can you really step into the pleasure that you're experiencing and allow that to take you into heightened states of pleasure and potentially an orgasm? And it's absolutely possible to do that. It just requires patience. It just requires really almost like mindfulness, like a type of meditation in how you touch yourself. And initially, when people start doing that, you can feel quite broken because it's like, this is what I want to achieve and I'm not able to do it. And there can be a lot of discomfort around not being able to do that. But yeah, it's being present with it, knowing that, quite often it takes like 21 days or more to actually change something about ourselves. So, change a habit, change the way that we do things.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest lie that we've been told about sex?
The biggest lie. I think the fact that we have been told that sex is shameful. And I think the reason that that lie has been told is because when we tap into our own authentic sexual expression, the confidence that gives you in your own body, your ability to move, in your own decisions, gives you this sense of empowerment that is really difficult to find anywhere else. Because some of the most confident people that I know, and I mean genuine confidence, that those are the people that are able to sit with the discomfort. Because confident isn't like being able to do something. Confident is being able to be uncomfortable about doing something and doing it anyway. And so if you're
there it is. There's the crown. It's going on again. That's one of my favorite statements. Do it anyway. You're going to have to do it scared, because you're not going to not be scared. People think I'm fearless. I'm not. I'm terrified all the time. You just have to do it. Right.
Yeah, exactly that. So, and before you do something out of your comfort zone, the discomfort that you experience in your own body, which, manifests itself in all these crazy thoughts that you have, if you can sit with that discomfort, and you can sit with that discomfort about who you are as a sexual person, knowing that you might be receiving judgment from other people, if you're able to be that and stay in your own truth, that in itself gives you this sense of feeling of, empowerment and knowing and trusting in yourself and your own abilities and your decisions. So I would say, the biggest side that we've been told is that sex is shameful and that we're bad people. In fact, I think it's completely different.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Oh my gosh. I can't believe this time has literally flown by. Time flies when you're having fun. I wish we could stay on another hour. But we're coming toward the end of our time together. So talk to this audience, and this audience is full of women between the ages of probably 20 to 65 or even more. What is something that everybody can do today that will help them have a better sexual experience, whether they are single, committed, non-monogamous, whatever their life situation? Is there something that everybody needs to be doing or could be doing to make our sex lives better?
Self-pleasure, because once you know your own body intimately, I'm using the word self-pleasure rather than masturbation, because it's about bringing self-love. So not just touching your genitals, but touching all of your body. So if you're able to bring pleasure to all different parts of your body, love your own body, touch it as though, it's somebody that absolutely adores you is touching it, which is yourself. So show yourself that same adoration. And once you give yourself full permission to be in your pleasure, knowing that you're worthy of that pleasure, then the way that you interact with anybody else, whether that's sexually or just, how you will allow yourself to be treated. It's like, if I'm showing myself that much love and pleasure, am I going to let somebody, exactly. Am I going to
right now? We're going to do a self-love hug right here. It's the yoga time. All right. Self-love hug, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, I constantly talk to people about loving yourself mentally, speaking out loud, affirmations about yourself, talking to your former versions of yourself for your mental health. But it never occurred to me to show that to yourself physically, and caring for yourself, whether it's your hair or your face or your body, but touching and loving on yourself. That's not something that most of us are very comfortable with.
Yeah, exactly that. So, next time you're applying lotion, rather than just doing it quickly, how can I apply the lotion in a loving, sensual way to myself? And how can I dedicate some time to really love on my body and allow myself to experience pleasure, or all of my body, including my genitals? Like, how can I show myself that love and that care? Because once I've taught my body that that's what it feels like, then that's what I'm going to expect from everybody else as well.
Oh man, that's so good. Thank you. I feel like clapping. That's so good, Carla. Thank you so much for sharing that. So if you're out there listening and maybe you're struggling in your sex life, maybe you have a ton of shame as it relates to self-pleasure or even having sex with your husband, or your boyfriend, it's okay. There are people out there that you can talk to. It ain't got to be your mama. It ain't got to be your therapist. It can't be your doctor because they're not sexually healthy either. So don't go there. Let them do your lab work and your x-rays and come to Carla to talk through the actual sex problems. And bonus for the US people, we get to hear her beautiful accent and her voice, which, we're all completely obsessed with in the United States. So Carla, where can the audience go and find you and connect if they need sex therapy, love and relationship therapy? You're the go-to gal. So tell us how to find you and connect with you.
Thank you. So I do have an Instagram account, which is the dot sexuality sanctuary. The only problem is Meta don't really like my content. So all the juicy content is on my website. So that's www.carlacrivaro.com. So, and then I have like articles, videos, and podcast appearances that you can get to listen to me talk and educate people around all sorts of elements of sex, from erectile dysfunction to anal play to blowjobs and everything in between.
I love it. Where else are you guys going to hear anal play, blowjobs, butt play? Come on over to the Queen's Lead podcast. We'll give it to you straight. I'm the real Amy Singleton. We ain't lying. We all got butts. I saw a man at the farmer's market this weekend that had a hat on that said, "Show me that butthole." So you know what? It's all right. We all have them. You can talk about your butthole. Sometimes it feels good. I ain't even gonna lie. Okay. So get with Carla if you need help to have a better sex life. Trust me, I have had a bad sex life and I have had a great sex life, and you want the great side of things. So thank you, Carla, for being my guest. And thank you for being a queen that leads. Everybody go over and connect with Carla at carlacrivaro.com.
The Queen's Lead podcast is recorded worldwide and produced by the kick-ass media team at the Height Digital home base in Nicaragua. Until our next episode, stay real, queens, and go lead. Remember to tap that follow and leave your review. For freebies and more real, inspiring content you love, go to amysingleton.net and connect with Amy on her socials at The Real Amy Singleton.
One more thing. This is the legal language, what my lawyer wrote and what I need to read to you. This podcast is presented for educational and entertainment purposes only. I am Amy Singleton, and I'm just your friend. Although I may speak to many on this show, I am not a psychotherapist, a business coach, a doctor, a CPA, a lawyer, or probably anyone who should be giving you professional advice. This podcast is not a substitute for a relationship with your doctor, coach, or any other licensed professional. Got it? Good. Now go be a queen and follow me at The Real Amy Singleton.